All right, so we're diving deep today, huh? Got a really interesting request from a listener, and I'm excited to dig in.
Yeah, always up for a challenge, especially when it comes to, economics and kind of busting some of those common myths we hear.
Exactly. So it's Kenya versus South Africa, their economies. We always hear, South Africa, the powerhouse, right? And Kenya, like the up-and-comer. But you wanted to get beyond those simple narratives.
Right, and I have a feeling our sources have some pretty interesting things to say about that.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
So let's start with just the basics. Our sources lay out some GDP numbers, and South Africa's still quite a bit bigger.
Yeah, it is, yeah. South Africa's sitting at about, let me see here, $418 billion.
Wow, that's a lot of billion.
It is. And then Kenya is at about $120 billion.
Okay, okay.
But and this is where it gets interesting. Kenya's been seeing some really impressive growth recently. Sometimes it even outpaces South Africa. Yeah, and our sources really emphasize that, those GDP figures, while they're important, they don't tell the whole story.
Right, right. It's like judging a book by its cover, as they say.
Exactly. That's a great analogy.
Speaking of which, one thing our source really dug into was kind of fact-checking some of those common beliefs about these two economies.
Hmm.
And one that stood out to me was, the whole idea that South Africa just blows Kenya out of the water when it comes to manufacturing.
Right.
But the article actually says that that's not really true anymore.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, if you look at, say, last year, Kenya's manufacturing sector, it actually grew by 3.2%, which
Yeah.
if you compare that to South Africa's 1.5% growth, well, it's quite a difference.
Huh. I mean, it's like Kenya's really making some moves there.
They are. And it just goes to show, that focusing just on the overall GDP, sometimes it can be misleading. We got to dig a little deeper, look at different sectors, different economic indicators,
Right. Get the full picture.
and the why.
Yeah.
What's driving these numbers?
Yeah, yeah. That historical context piece feels really important here. I mean,
Ah,
it's not just about where these economies are today, but kind of how they got there, right?
absolutely. I mean, you think about Kenya, for example. Their success in mobile technology, especially with M-Pesa, it's just been phenomenal.
Yeah.
And part of that comes from, Kenya actually having some challenges with traditional banking infrastructure.
Okay.
So they sort of leapfrogged those problems. They found a different way to do things, and now they have this booming fintech sector.
It's like turning, a weakness into a strength almost.
Exactly. They saw an opportunity and ran with it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, while Kenya's doing that, what about South Africa? What kind of historical stuff has shaped their economy?
Well, South Africa has, a really long history of having well-developed infrastructure.
Mm.
They've got a sophisticated financial sector. Those are big strengths.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that.
But on the other hand, they're also dealing with the legacy of, inequality from the apartheid era, political instability, unfortunately.
Right.
And those things have, economic consequences as well.
So it's kind of like, even though South Africa might be, starting from a different place, they have different hurdles to overcome.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Different strengths, different challenges. And that's why, these kinds of deep dives are so important. These countries, they have their own unique stories, of growth and struggle and adaptation. It's not just one simple narrative.
Yeah, it's never that simple, is it?
Never.
So, I mean, we've talked about, busting some myths. We've gone beyond just those GDP numbers. We've looked at the history. But the big question, I think, is like, what about the future? What does the future hold for these two economies?
Right. Well, looking ahead, Kenya has just incredible potential in areas like renewable energy.
Yeah.
And tourism, of course, always a big one.
Yeah.
And then South Africa, they've got that strong foundation to build on. Uh-huh.
So, if they can really address those challenges, those persistent issues of inequality and instability, I think we could see some renewed growth there as well.
So, I mean, both countries have a lot going for them, really.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
not about, picking a winner or a loser. It's about understanding the potential and the complexities of each situation.
Right. Understanding the nuances.
Exactly. And that's crucial for anyone, really. I mean, whether you're interested in business or travel or just, understanding how the global economy works.
Yeah, it affects us all, one way or another. So for our listeners out there, thinking about everything we've talked about, I'm curious, what do you think? Which country do you think is better positioned for long-term economic success, and why? Let us know.